Don't ride with me! The words cut through the desert wind, sharp as a whip, as Caleb Ward froze beside his campfire. The voice came from the shadows where a woman stood, her black duster coat blending with the night. In her hand, a tattered leather journal trembled, its pages marked with a name that sent a chill down Caleb's spine. Elias Crow. He'd found an identical journal that morning, tucked into his saddlebag with a note scrawled inside, "Find Elias Crow, Red Hollow, or you'll never ride again." Now, this stranger's warning hung in the air, heavy as the dust swirling around them. "Ride with me, Drifter," she said, her eyes blazing, "and you'll regret it forever." Caleb's hand hovered near his colt, his bay horse Ghost snorting behind him. "Who are you?" he asked, voice steady despite the knot in his chest. "Mara Kane," she replied, stepping into the firelight. A scar traced her left cheek, her hat low, her revolver glinting at her hip. "And I know you're Caleb Ward, gun hand, man who don't stay long enough to answer questions." He squinted, the journal's weight burning in his coat. "What's this about Crow?" She held up her own journal, its cover worn but the ink fresh. "Got one too. Found it outside my cabin, same name, same threat. Someone's calling us to Red Hollow." Caleb's jaw tightened. He'd heard of Elias Crow, whispers in saloons from Santa Fe to Dodge, a rancher, quiet, until he vanished 3 years ago, leaving only rumors of a dark deal and a trail of missing souls. Now his name was back, tied to these journals, pulling Caleb and this woman into something bigger than either of them. "Why me?" he asked, his fingers brushing his gun. "'Cause you're marked, same as me." Mara's voice was low, like a storm brewing. "Crow's Ranch is 10 miles north of Red Hollow. Lights been seen there at night, shadows moving. Folks who go looking don't come back." He glanced at the horizon, where the Sangre de Cristo Mountains loomed under a bruised sky. "You think Crow's alive?" "I think something is," Mara said, "and it wants us." Caleb didn't believe in ghosts, but he believed in threats. The journal in his coat wasn't a request, it was a demand, and he wasn't one to run from a fight. "Ride at dawn," he said, tossing a stick into the fire. "I ain't waiting." Mara's lips curled, not quite a smile. "Don't ride with me, Caleb Ward. You'll wish you hadn't." He met her gaze, his own hard as iron. "Reckon I already do." Red Hollow was a weathered town, its clapboard buildings fading under the relentless sun. Caleb rode in on Ghost, the saloon's lanterns casting flickering shadows as he dismounted. The journal sat heavy in his saddlebag, its words, "Find Elias Crow, Red Hollow, or you'll never ride again," etched in his mind. He didn't know Crow, didn't know why his name was in that book, but the threat felt real, like a noose tightening. The saloon was alive with noise, piano music, laughter, the clink of glasses, but the air turned tense when Caleb stepped inside. Eyes flicked his way, then darted off as if they sensed the storm he carried. He ordered a whiskey, his back to the wall, watching the room. A card game in the corner, a cowboy singing off-key, a barmaid dodging a clumsy grab. Normal, except for the fear in their glances, like they knew something was coming. Sheriff Hank Travers sat at a table near the back, his badge glinting faintly. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, with a face like carved stone. He didn't look up until Caleb approached, the journal's weight urging him forward. "Sheriff," Caleb said, setting his glass down, "know a man named Elias Crow?" Travers' eyes narrowed, his hand resting on his belt near his revolver. "Caleb Ward, drifter, always trouble." "Answer the question," Caleb said, his tone low. The sheriff leaned forward, his chair creaking. "Crow's gone, vanished 3 years back. Whatever you're chasing, it's nothing but dust." "Then why's his name showing up?" Caleb asked. "Found a journal. Says Crow's in Red Hollow. Says I gotta find him." Travers' face stayed hard, but his fingers twitched. "You and Mara Kane," he said. "Heard she's around. Bad company, drifter." "She ain't my concern," Caleb said. "The journal is." "Burn it," Travers growled. "Ride out. This ain't your fight." Caleb leaned closer, his voice a whisper. "Someone's stirring trouble, Sheriff. You know who?" Travers stood, his shadow looming. "You want to stay breathing, leave Crow be, and steer clear of Kane." He pushed past, the saloon doors swinging as he left. Caleb stayed put, his mind racing. The sheriff knew more than he let on, and Mara's warning rang too loud to ignore. He didn't trust her, but he trusted the fear in her eyes even less. Dawn broke cold, the sky streaked with gray. Caleb saddled Ghost, his hands steady despite the unease gnawing at him. Mara was waiting outside the livery, her black stallion pawing the dirt. She didn't speak, just tossed him another journal page, torn and fresh, the ink still dark. Crow's Ranch. Tonight. Come alone. Found it on my door, she said. Yours? Caleb nodded, pulling an identical page from his coat. Someone's playing us. Or hunting us, Mara said, her hand on her revolver. You ridin'? He swung into the saddle, his eyes on the northern plains. Ain't backing down. Mara mounted up, her face like stone. Don't say I didn't warn you. They rode north, Red Hollow fading behind them, the plains stretching wide and silent. The air grew heavy as they neared Crow's Ranch, like the land itself was holding its breath. Caleb's hand stayed near his Colt, Mara's silence louder than any words. The threat of Elias Crow loomed, a shadow neither could outrun. By noon, the ranch came into view, a crumbling house, its windows dark, its barn sagging under time's weight. No sound, no life, just the wind whistling through broken boards. But in the dirt, fresh hoofprints led to the door. Someone, or something, had been here. Caleb dismounted, his gun drawn. Eyes open, he said, voice low. Mara's revolver was already out, her gaze scanning the shadows. He's here, she said. I feel it. They approached the house, the air thick with dust and dread. Inside, the truth about Elias Crow waited, a truth that would shake Red Hollow to its core. The door to Elias Crow's ranch house creaked as Caleb pushed it open, the sound sharp against the silence of the plains. Dust motes danced in the slivers of sunlight, piercing the boarded windows, and the air inside was stale, thick with the scent of rot and something metallic. Mara followed close, her revolver steady, her eyes darting to every shadow. The hoofprints they'd seen outside stopped at the threshold, as if whoever, or whatever, made them had vanished into the dark. Caleb's grip tightened on his Colt, the journal in his coat a lead weight. The note's words burned in his mind. Crow's Ranch. Tonight. Come alone. He hadn't come alone, but he was starting to wish he had. Don't touch nothing, Mara whispered, her voice a blade's edge. This place ain't right. Caleb didn't answer, stepping over a broken chair, his boots scuffing the warped floorboards. The house was a husk, furniture overturned, walls scarred with claw-like marks, as if something had tried to tear its way out. A shattered lantern lay in the corner, its glass glinting like teeth. He stopped at a table where a single object sat, another journal, identical to the ones he and Mara carried, its pages open to a scrawled message. You're too late. Damn it, Caleb muttered, flipping the journal shut. The name Elias Crow was scratched into the cover, deep like it was carved with a knife. Mara leaned over his shoulder, her breath quick. He's playing with us. Or someone is, Caleb said, scanning the room. The shadows seemed to shift, though the light hadn't changed. You still think Crow's alive? She didn't answer, her eyes fixed on a door at the far end of the room, half ajar. A faint sound came from beyond, a low, rhythmic thump, like a heartbeat. Caleb's skin prickled. He nodded toward the door, and Mara moved with him, silent as a ghost. They stepped through, guns raised, into what had once been a study. Bookshelves lined the walls, their contents spilled across the floor, pages torn and yellowed. A desk sat in the center, its surface littered with maps, all marked with the same point, Red Hollow. And there, nailed to the wall above the desk, was a tattered wanted poster, its ink faded, but the name clear. Elias Crow, wanted for murder. The face sketched on it was blurred, almost scratched out, but the eyes seemed to stare straight through Caleb. Murder? He said, glancing at Mara. Thought you said he was a rancher. He was, she replied, her voice tight. Till he wasn't. The thumping grew louder, coming from a trap door in the floor, its edges caked with dirt. Caleb knelt, brushing the dust away, revealing a rusted iron ring. He looked at Mara, who nodded, her jaw set. Together they pulled the trap door open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The thump was unmistakable now, steady, deliberate, like someone, or something, waiting below. You first, Mara said, her tone dry but her eyes sharp with fear. Caleb snorted. Ladies first. She didn't smile, just started down the stairs, her revolver leading the way. Caleb followed, the air growing colder with each step, the thump echoing in his chest. At the bottom, a lantern flickered on a crate, casting jagged shadows across a dirt-walled cellar. In the center stood a wooden crate, its lid pried open, and inside a pile of journals, dozens, maybe hundreds, each marked with Elias Crow. "What in hell?" Caleb muttered, picking one up. The pages were filled with names, dates, places, Red Hollow, Abilene, Tucson, all towns he'd passed through. His own name was there, scrawled in that same sharp handwriting, next to today's date. Mara grabbed another journal, her hands shaking. "My name's here too," she said, "and others. Folks who've gone missing." The thump stopped. The silence was worse. Caleb turned, his gun raised as a shadow moved in the corner, a figure, cloaked in darkness, too tall, too still. "Who's there?" he barked. No answer. Mara spun, her revolver trained on the shadow, but it was gone, like smoke. The lantern flickered, and for a moment, Caleb swore he saw eyes in the dark, cold, unblinking, watching. "We need to get out," Mara said, her voice low but urgent. "Now." Caleb didn't argue. They climbed the stairs, the journals clutched in their hands, the air heavy with the sense of something following. Outside, the plains were still, the sun low, painting the ranch blood red. Ghost and Mara's stallion snorted, pawing the ground, as if they sensed it too. "Look," Mara said, pointing to the barn. Its doors were open now, though they'd been closed when they arrived. Fresh tracks led inside, boots, not hooves, deep and uneven, like someone had stumbled. Caleb's gut twisted. "Stay here," he said, starting toward the barn. "Like hell," Mara snapped, following close. The barn smelled of mildew and hay, its interior dark except for a single shaft of light cutting through a hole in the roof. In the center, a rope hung from a rafter, swaying slightly, though there was no breeze. At its end, a noose, empty but knotted tight like it was waiting. On the ground below, another journal lay open, its pages blank except for 2 words. "You're next." Caleb's hand tightened on his gun. "This ain't Crow," he said. "This is someone playing a game." "Or something," Mara said, her voice barely a whisper. "Crow made a deal, they say, with something that don't die." He turned to her, his eyes hard. "You believe that?" "I believe we're being hunted," she said, "and I ain't waiting to find out by who." They backed out of the barn, guns drawn, the journals heavy in their hands. The ranch felt alive now, the shadows too long, the silence too loud. Caleb mounted Ghost, Mara her stallion, and they rode hard back toward Red Hollow, the weight of those journals pulling them like anchors. The town was quieter than it should have been when they returned, the streets empty, the saloon's music gone. Caleb's skin crawled as they dismounted outside the sheriff's office. Travers was inside, his boots on his desk, a bottle of whiskey in his hand. He didn't look surprised to see them. "Thought I told you to leave," he said, his voice rough. Caleb tossed the journal from the ranch onto the desk. "Found this, and more. You want to explain?" Travers glanced at the journal, his face unreadable. "Crow's dead. You're chasing shadows." "Then why's my name in there?" Caleb snapped, pointing at the pages. "And hers? And half the damn territory?" Mara stepped forward, her revolver still in hand. "Someone's leaving these, Sheriff. Someone who knows too much." Travers stood, his bulk filling the room. "You're stirring up trouble that don't need stirring. Burn those books and ride out." "And if we don't?" Caleb asked, his hand near his gun. The sheriff's eyes darkened. "Then you'll find out why folks don't talk about Elias Crow." Mara leaned in, her voice low. "You know who's doing this, don't you?" Travers didn't answer, just grabbed his hat and walked out, leaving the journal on the desk. Caleb exchanged a look with Mara, the air between them crackling with distrust and necessity. They were bound now, whether they liked it or not, by a threat neither could name. Night fell over Red Hollow, the stars hidden by clouds. Caleb and Mara sat in the saloon, the journals spread out on a table, their pages a map of fear. Names, dates, places, all tied to Crow, all tied to people who'd vanished. The barmaid lingered nearby, her eyes nervous like she wanted to speak but didn't dare. "These ain't just threats," Mara said, tracing a name in the journal. "It's a list. Someone's keeping score." Caleb nodded, his mind turning. "Crow's ranch tonight. That's what the note said. But we went early. Whoever's behind this didn't expect that." "Or they did," Mara said, her voice grim. And they're waitin'. A crash came from the saloon's back room, sharp and sudden. Caleb was on his feet, gun drawn, Mara right beside him. The barmaid gasped, pointing toward the sound. It's him, she whispered. He's been here. Who? Caleb demanded. She shook her head, backing away. Don't make me say his name. Caleb pushed through the door, Mara at his heels, into a storage room stacked with crates. A lantern lay shattered on the floor, its oil pooling, and there, scrawled on the wall in fresh ink, was a message. Come alone, or Red Hollow burns. Mara's breath hissed out. He's here. Caleb's eyes narrowed, his gun steady. Then let's find him. They stepped back into the night, the journals clutched tight, the threat of Elias Crow, or whatever he'd become, closing in like a storm. The ranch was calling them back, and this time, Caleb knew there'd be no running. The night was black as coal, the moon choked by clouds as Caleb Ward and Mara Kane rode back to Elias Crow's ranch. The journals in their saddlebags felt heavier with every mile, their pages filled with names of the missing, the damned, and now their own. The warning scrawled in the saloon, come alone, or Red Hollow burns, echoed in Caleb's mind, sharp as a spur. He didn't trust Mara, didn't trust the sheriff, didn't trust the silence of the plains. But the threat of Crow, or whatever wore his name, was real, and it was closing in. Don't slow down, Mara said, her voice cutting through the wind. Her stallion's hooves pounded the dirt, her revolver glinting in the starlight. He's waitin'. Caleb gripped Ghost's reins, his Colt ready. You sure it's a he? Mara's eyes flicked to him hard as flint. I'm sure it ain't human. They reached the ranch as midnight loomed, the house a dark scar against the horizon. The barn doors were shut now, the hoofprints they'd seen earlier gone, as if the earth had swallowed them. Caleb dismounted, his boots hitting the ground with a dull thud. The air was wrong, too still, too cold, like the land was holding its breath. Check the house, he said, nodding toward the sagging structure. I'll take the barn. Mara shook her head. We stay together. Last time we split, we got played. He didn't argue. They tethered their horses and approached the house, guns drawn, the journals tucked in their coats. The door hung open, swaying slightly, though no wind stirred. Inside, the same dust, the same claw marks on the walls, but something new, a faint glow from the study, pulsing like a heartbeat. Caleb led the way, his steps silent on the warped floorboards. The glow came from a lantern on the desk, its flame low but steady, casting shadows that seemed to writhe. The wanted poster of Elias Crow still hung on the wall, its scratched-out face watching them. Mara stopped, her breath catching as she pointed to the desk. Another journal lay open, its pages fresh, the ink wet. You came, now you stay. Trap, Caleb muttered, his gun sweeping the room. Too late for that, Mara said, her voice low. She flipped through the journal, her fingers trembling. Look. The page listed their names, Caleb Ward, Mara Kane, next to a date, tonight. Below them, more names, some crossed out, others fresh, all tied to Red Hollow. At the bottom, a single line. Crow sees all. A creak came from above, sharp and deliberate. Caleb's eyes shot to the ceiling, where dust sifted down, as if someone paced the attic. Mara nodded, and they moved to the stairs, their steps careful, guns ready. The attic was a narrow space, its rafters sagging, its air thick with mildew. A single window let in a sliver of moonlight, illuminating a figure in the corner, a man, or what was left of one. He was tall, cloaked in a tattered duster, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. His hands were gloved, one clutching a journal, the other a knife, its blade glinting. Caleb's heart pounded, but he kept his voice steady. Elias Crow? The figure didn't move, didn't speak. Then, slow as death, it raised its head, revealing eyes that burned cold, like stars gone wrong. You shouldn't have come, it said, its voice a rasp, like sand on stone. Mara stepped forward, her revolver aimed at its chest. Who are you? Why the journals? The figure laughed, a sound that made Caleb's skin crawl. I'm what's left. Crow's gone. But his deal, it lingers. What deal? Caleb demanded, his gun steady. The figure tilted its head as if amused. Power, land, blood. He wanted it all. Gave himself to something older than these hills. Now it's collectin'. Mara's eyes narrowed. Collectin' what? Names, it said, tapping the journal. Yours, mine, everyone's. Caleb's mind raced. The journals, the names, the missing. It wasn't a man they were chasing. It was something else, something that used Crow's name like a mask. "You're not Crow," he said. The figure stepped closer, its knife catching the light. "Crow's in me, in this place, in you, soon enough." Mara fired, the shot deafening in the attic. The figure staggered, but no blood came, only a hiss of air, like steam escaping. It lunged, knife flashing, and Caleb dove, tackling Mara to the floor. The blade sank into the wall, splintering wood. The figure vanished into the shadows, its laughter echoing as footsteps pounded below. "Move!" Caleb shouted, hauling Mara up. They ran downstairs, the house groaning around them, as if it were alive. The lantern on the desk flickered out, plunging them into darkness. Caleb's hand found Mara's arm, pulling her toward the door, but it slammed shut before they could reach it, the lock clicking with no hand to turn it. "Damn it!" Mara hissed, kicking the door. It didn't budge. Caleb spun, his gun raised as the laughter returned, circling them. "Show yourself!" he yelled. A whisper came from the dark, close enough to feel on his neck. "You're mine!" Mara grabbed a chair, smashing it against a boarded window. The wood splintered, letting in a gust of cold air. "Go!" she shouted, climbing through. Caleb followed, his heart hammering, the journals still clutched tight. Outside, Ghost and Mara's stallion were gone, their ropes cut, hoofprints fading into the night. "We're on foot," Caleb said, scanning the plains. The ranch seemed to loom larger now, its shadows stretching too far. Mara's face was grim. "It's not letting us leave." They ran, the journals heavy, the night closing in. Red Hollow was miles away, but the threat was here, now, in the laughter that followed, in the eyes that watched from the dark. Caleb didn't know what Crow had become, but he knew one thing. They weren't just hunting a man. They were hunted. The plains stretched endless under a sky heavy with storm clouds, the air crackling as Caleb Ward and Mara Kane stumbled through the dark, their horses gone, their guns near empty. The journals, those cursed books filled with names and threats, were stuffed in their coats, their weight a reminder of the thing that hunted them. The laughter from Crow's ranch still echoed in Caleb's ears, that rasping voice whispering, "You're mine." Red Hollow was a distant speck, but every step felt like wading through quicksand, the shadows too thick, the silence too loud. "We can't outrun it," Mara said, her voice sharp, her revolver glinting as she scanned the horizon. Her scar gleamed pale in the flashes of lightning. "It's not human." "Then what is it?" Caleb snapped, his Colt steady despite the ache in his legs. "Crow's dead. You said it yourself." Mara's eyes met his, haunted. "Something took his name, his deal. It's in those journals, in the ranch, in this damn town." A howl cut through the night, not a coyote, but something older, hungrier. Caleb spun, gun raised, but saw only darkness. The journals felt heavier, like they were pulling him back to the ranch. He wanted to burn them, to leave this cursed place, but the note's words burned brighter. "Come alone, or Red Hollow burns." "We gotta end this," he said, stopping in the dirt. "Back at the ranch, tonight." Mara grabbed his arm, her grip iron. "You're crazy. It wants us there." "And it'll follow us wherever we go," Caleb said, shaking her off. "You want to run forever?" She didn't answer, just stared at the plains where a faint glow flickered on the horizon, Crow's ranch calling them back. "Fine," she said finally, "but don't say I didn't warn you." They turned, trudging toward the glow, the storm closing in. Lightning cracked, illuminating the ranch as they approached, its windows like empty eyes. The barn doors were open again, swaying, and inside, a lantern burned, casting jagged shadows. Caleb's heart pounded, but he stepped forward, Mara at his side, their guns ready. The barn was a maze of crates and rotting hay, the air thick with mildew. In the center, a circle of journals lay on the floor, their pages open, names glowing faintly, as if written in fire. Above them, the noose still hung, swaying, empty. Caleb's name was scrawled in the nearest journal, Mara's beside it, the ink fresh. "It's here," Mara whispered, her gun trembling. A shadow moved, tall and wrong, its duster flapping like wings. The figure from the attic stood at the far end of the barn, its knife gleaming, its eyes cold stars. "You came," it rasped, stepping into the light. Its face was a ruin, half crow, half something else, like a mask stitched from nightmares. What are you? Caleb demanded, his voice steady despite the fear clawing his chest. The thing laughed low and grating. Crow wanted power, land, forever. He gave his soul for it. Now I collect what's owed. Collect what? Mara snapped, her gun aimed at its heart. Names, it said, gesturing to the journals. Lives. Red Hollow's mine and you're next. Caleb's eyes flicked to the journals, the names glowing brighter as thunder shook the barn. He understood now. The deal Crow made wasn't just his own. It bound the town, the land, every soul tied to those books. And now it wanted them, their names sealing the pact. You can't have us, Caleb said, stepping closer, his Colt raised. The thing tilted its head, amused. You rode with her, it said, nodding to Mara. You chose this. Mara's face twisted, guilt flashing in her eyes. I didn't know, she said, her voice breaking. I thought I could stop it. Caleb turned to her, his gun still on the figure. What didn't you know? She swallowed, her scar stark in the lantern light. Crow was my kin, my uncle. I was there when he made the deal. I ran, thought I could outright it, but it follows, always. The thing laughed, its knife flashing as it lunged. Caleb fired, the shot echoing, but the figure didn't fall, only staggered, its form flickering like smoke. Mara fired too, emptying her revolver, but the thing kept coming, its laughter louder than the storm. Caleb grabbed a journal, hurling it into the lantern. The oil caught, flames licking the pages, the names burning. The thing screamed, a sound that tore at Caleb's ears, and lunged again, its knife grazing his arm, cold as ice. Mara tackled it, her own knife drawn, and they rolled into the hay, shadows twisting. Burn them, she shouted, struggling as the thing pinned her. Caleb grabbed another journal, tossing it into the fire. The flames roared, the thing's screams growing louder, its form fraying like cloth. He kept going, journal after journal, the names vanishing in the blaze. The thing weakened, its eyes dimming, but it slashed at Mara, her coat tearing as she fought back. Caleb, she yelled, her voice raw. All of them! He hesitated, his own name glowing in the last journal. If he burned it, what would it take from him? His life, his soul. The thing lunged again, its knife aimed at Mara's heart. No time to think. He threw the journal into the flames, the fire erupting, consuming the barn. The thing screamed, a final shattering cry, and collapsed, its form dissolving into ash. The journals were gone, the names with them, the barn a blaze of light and heat. Caleb pulled Mara to her feet, her face streaked with soot, her eyes wide with something like relief. Out! He shouted, dragging her toward the doors as the rafters groaned. They stumbled into the rain, the storm breaking, washing the ash from their hands. The ranch burned behind them, its shadows swallowed by the flames. They stood in the mud, breathing hard, the journals gone, the thing gone. But the weight lingered. It's over, Mara said, her voice hollow. Ain't it? Caleb looked at the fire, then at her. You knew Crow. You knew what he did. She nodded, her scar glistening in the rain. I thought I could fix it, thought I could run. But it followed me. And you. He wanted to hate her, to blame her for the noose he'd nearly worn. But the journals were burned, the names freed, and Red Hollow was safe. For now. Don't ride with me again, he said, turning toward the plains. Mara's laugh was bitter. You regret it, don't you? Caleb mounted a horse that had wandered back, Ghost's reins loose in his hand. Forever, he said, and rode into the storm, leaving her behind, the ashes of Elias Crow's deal fading in the rain.